Hey, everybody. Good morning. Roman Polnar coming to you live here from Pillar 6 College Planning. And welcome to this week's Financial Aid Wednesdays. Today is September 29th. We're just a couple of days away from the FAFSA going live and the financial aid season opening up for millions of families across the U.S. who are either getting into college or are applying to college, looking for financial aid to pay for their first year of college, but also for all those families that have kids already in college looking for financial aid in the next year. And I've been talking a lot about the FAFSA just to help families prepare for this upcoming financial aid season starting in just a couple of days. And I do these financial aid Wednesdays in order to help you find more money to pay for your kids' college and hopefully see them graduate without debt and without you having to dig into your personal savings and hopefully not touching your retirement, but being able to afford college comfortably and easily. And we can use the financial aid system to help you do that because there's a lot of money. But unfortunately, that money isn't very easy to get. Not that it's sort of locked away and hidden. It's just that the government requires that you do certain things in a certain order to get that money. And because most of us are so busy, we generally don't have the time to learn everything about our financial aid system. And so when the time comes for families to fill out these financial aid forms and try to unlock the financial aid that they deserve and they need and that they're looking for, it ends up being difficult. And so that's why I do these videos, is by looking at the most common questions or the biggest topics that I think are of most value, and I try to explore them in these Financial Aid Wednesdays. And so this week, what I want to talk about is this topic about, well, who should really worry about the FAFSA? Because I've been talking a lot about the FAFSA for high school seniors, and I'm seeing a lot of questions coming up like, well, gosh, we're not finding the money that we need, or what do we do to get more money that we're looking for and we're having a hard time finding it? And I realized that just talking to families who are applying for financial aid today is doing a lot of you who have kids that are still younger in earlier grades in high school, kind of doing you a disservice, because the financial aid that you're ultimately looking to get for your kids' first year of high school is actually determined by the things that you do in the earlier years. It's not just when you go to complete the FAFSA. Let me expand on that, because technically, if you really want to get the most amount of money from the FAFSA or from the financial aid system, you really got to start this process when your kids are sophomores in high school. And the reason for that is simple. The FAFSA is going to ask you to report two things to the government in order for them to determine your eligibility for financial aid. They're going to ask for your income and they're going to ask for your savings. Those are the two things. But the income that they're going to be looking at is from your kids or from your tax return when your kids are sophomores in high school. So the FAFSA is always looking at the 2 years, at the income that's 2 years prior. Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you there. All right, so what does that really mean? Well, that means on January 1st of this upcoming year, in just 3 months, the time is gonna, or the clock is gonna start ticking for you to basically try to control what will be reported on your tax return. And so if you can make any kind of changes, well, not changes, like you can't change what you make, and by all means, go and make as much as you can. But, a lot of times I see families, sell some investments or, when they receive inheritance, it ends up hitting or doing rollovers or taking money out of their retirement, any kind of things that end up increasing the income that you show on your tax return will be visible to colleges 2 years from now. So just be mindful of that. And if there are things you can do to avoid artificially increasing the amount of income that you're showing on the tax return, well, that's going to benefit you in the future. And what about junior families? This is an incredibly important year for financial aid as well, because the junior year is all about finding colleges. Usually, families leave it up to their kids to look for colleges, right? Whether they're meeting with their guidance counselor, maybe they're talking to their friends, but it's all about them looking for colleges where they will want to apply in the senior year. Well, this is a really big opportunity for parents to get involved. The reason for that is that regardless of how much financial aid you might be eligible for, it's ultimately up to each college to decide how much money to actually give you. So even if you qualify for a lot of financial aid, not all colleges are going to give you the money that you're eligible to receive. And so it's really important for you to actually find colleges that will give you all the money that you are eligible for, that you need, and that you deserve. And that has to happen in the junior year. And so there's a lot that you can do in that year to influence the amount of financial aid you're ultimately going to get when your kids actually apply. So, for all of you junior families out there, right now is the time for you to start looking at colleges that are actually going to give you money. I've got some training that I've done in the past that talks a lot about what you can do, but there's a great website. It's a free resource called collegedata.com that allows you to do a lot of that research. So make sure to keep checking back or go through our channel and see if you can find that video. And if you have any questions, or if you want me to point you to that video, just drop a comment in this post and I'll get back to you. But the senior families are the ones that are really working on the tightest deadline, because this is the time for you to submit the FAFSA and actually go on record and share your finances with the government in order to get your financial aid. And those families that will be completing the FAFSA on October 1st or starting October 1st of this year, you got to know that there are a couple of changes being rolled out because of the new FAFSA that is going to change the way that you qualify for financial aid. Now, this year's changes are actually not financial, which in a way is good because it's simple and it's easy. It doesn't require you to do anything differently, but they create more competition because of the two changes. More people are going to be applying this year because more people are going to be eligible to apply this year. And as a result, if you're looking for more financial aid today more than ever, it's really important to get your FAFSA done correctly and on time, because the main reasons people lose financial aid are just simple errors on the FAFSA and because they wait too long to submit the form. If you're a family of a high school senior and you want some more help to complete the FAFSA correctly from the first time and do it quickly so that you can apply and reserve your place online, go to FAFSAkit.com. Check out that new course that we have specifically for families of high school seniors applying or are getting ready to apply right now. This course is going to help you because it's tremendously insightful and it's going to walk you through every single thing, every single step that you would have to do to get the FAFSA done 100% right. But for everybody else whose kids are going to be starting college in the future, in 2023, 24, or 25, you have to be aware because the new FAFSA rules are coming out year by year, and they're going to completely change the way that we've been qualifying or have been getting financial aid. All of that is going to change. So I want to take a few minutes now and talk about that. So what are these changes? First and foremost, well, the first thing is the new FAFSA is going to be much, much simpler. It's going to be reduced from about 108 question form that it is today to down to 36 questions. That's the latest count that we've been told. And that's a really big positive because it's going to make it easier for many more families to actually apply for financial aid. Now, the thing that it's going to do is create, obviously, more financial aid applications, which is, in a way, great because there will be so many more families who are going to be applying for financial aid, right? That may not be applying right now because they're scared off by the hard form or by the complexity of the form. And that's a good thing. But it also comes with a bit of a downside as well because, well, for you, there's going to be a lot more competition. At the end of the day, the government and the colleges only set aside a certain amount of money for every year's financial aid. And so if you have more people going after the same financial aid dollars, that means there's going to be more competition, which means that you need to be even more diligent, even more attentive to getting everything done correctly and on time. Because if you don't, then somebody else in line is going to come up and claim the money that you could have gotten. All right. So that's a really big change that you need to be mindful of. Number three, the expected family contribution is being replaced by another term called the student aid index. And it's not a positive or a negative, it's just a sideways, kind of a neutral change. It makes no real difference, no real impact. It's just a different name. And the reason the government did this is because they thought that the expected family contribution was a confusing term because it didn't quite, or I should say, it misled people to think that if their expected family contribution is some dollar amount, let's just say it's $10,000, and families just expected that wherever their kids get accepted to, they will be expected to pay no more than $10,000 because that's their expected family contribution. But in reality, because not all colleges give you 100% of the money that you qualified for, and because not all colleges give out free money, some families might end up having to pay extra money out of pocket, right? Because they didn't get all of that financial aid that they might be eligible for in free money, right? So that increases their expected ultimate contribution. And so the government said, well, let's just get rid of expected family contributions so we don't confuse people, and we'll call it the student aid index. Doesn't change anything at the end of the day. It's just a name. But there is going to be a really, really big change that will be happening in the next coming 1 or 2 years for divorced families. And it's a really bad, unfortunately, negative change because as of right now, let's say you're a married couple, you can decide either of the two parents can fill out the FAFSA because it's your family finances that are going to get reported to the government. So it's your income and your savings. But if you're a divorced family, you technically have a choice whose finances to report, because as of right now, the FAFSA only wants you to report the financial information from the custodial parent. And the custodial parent is the one with whom the student spends more time in a 12-month period. And so assuming a standard 50-50 custody, right now you've got a bit of an option, right? It's a benefit to deciding which of the two parents have lower income and fewer assets, and just have your students spend more time with them. And they're the ones who share their finances with the government and therefore qualify for more financial aid. Well, when the change or the new FAFSA processes this change, that's going to go away. And the person whose finances are going to be shared on the FAFSA is going to be the one providing the most financial support, which means it's likely to be the parent with higher income and probably more assets, which means that that family is going to qualify for less financial aid. So if you are a divorced family and you are going to be sending your kid to college sometime in the next 1 to 2 years, you really got to dig into this and see what you can do, because there are things you can do to kind of minimize the impact of this change. And I've done some videos on that. Again, if you want more information on this particular topic, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll send you that video that shows you what you can do to better prepare and navigate around this change. There's also going to be a big change for mid-income families. And this is an unfortunate thing because, here, we'll put a down arrow, because mid-income families have already been squeezed quite a bit by the financial aid formula. It just has not been good for the middle class. And unfortunately, with these changes, it's likely to get even worse. The biggest reason for that is that The FAFSA allows you to, um, there's something called asset allowance. It basically allows you to not have to count some of your savings towards your expected family contribution. So there's this allowance that, depending on how much money you've got, a big chunk of it could be set aside, and the government's not even going to look at that at all. And it used to be just 10 years ago fairly significant. I think it was like 50 some thousand dollars for an average family, which means you can have money in the bank or investments, and the government's not going to even expect you to pay anything out of that money towards college. Well, over the last few years, that number has been coming down, and it's about $6,000 right now, which means all of your savings or investments above 6,000 are going to get counted towards your expected family contribution. Well, as we look ahead, the government hasn't put any positive changes into the law or into the rules to change that trajectory. In fact, it's the opposite. So like that allowance is expected to go down to zero. And that's not a good thing, which means none of your assets or none of your savings will be protected anymore. And so your expected family contribution is likely to increase. And then there's another big change that's going to be taking place for families that have multiple kids in college. So if you have twins or if you have kids who are close in age, maybe they're 1 or 2 years apart, and you'll have more than one student in college at the same time. For you also, that's going to be a big negative. As of right now, your expected family contribution gets shared by every student in college. So let's say your expected family contribution is $30,000. If you have two kids in college at the same time, that expected contribution gets cut in half. So you're only expected to come up with $15,000 per student. In total, you're not going to have to come out of pocket, or at least you shouldn't come out of pocket for more than $30,000. Well, with this new FAFSA changes, that's going to go away. And unfortunately, you will be expected to pay $30,000 per student, meaning that the total amount the government thinks you'll be able to pay is $60,000. And that's just crazy because most families are having a hard enough time coming up with the expected family contribution for one student, but doubling that, that's just going to put a lot of kids, a lot of families, a lot of parents into a tough spot. And so, again, if you're any of these families, if you're a mid-income family and you want to look or find more financial aid, or if you're going to have more than one student in college, drop me a note in the comment section and I'll send you some additional training where I teach you how to actually navigate around these changes. But just be mindful that if that's you, you got to start thinking about this stuff now before you fill out the FAFSA, because all of these things you have to do in advance. So when is all of this happening? The only thing we know is what's happening this year on this FAFSA in 2021. Two changes are going away. The first change is that there's a question on the FAFSA if the student has had any prior drug or criminal convictions. And if the answer was yes, prior to this year, they were automatically disqualified from any federal financial aid. Starting this year, that's no longer the case. If your student had any prior drug or criminal convictions, they will be eligible for need-based financial aid from the government. Now, one thing I should tell you is that the question is still on the FAFSA. The government didn't have enough time to remove the question. It's still there, and you have to answer it honestly, because at the end of the FAFSA, there's going to be a question. Have you completed or answered all questions honestly to the best of your knowledge? And you're supposed to sign confirming that, yes, you did say and answer everything correctly and truthfully. So don't lie about it. So if your student has had prior, convictions, you have to say yes. But the good thing is it no longer disqualifies them from financial aid. The second change being going into effect this year is that you used to have to register male students for the selective service. meaning that if there is ever a draft, you're effectively signing your student up to be drafted. We haven't had one, and hopefully and likely we won't, but it held a lot of parents from actually submitting the FAFSA because they didn't want to register their son for the draft potentially. And so they didn't submit the FAFSA and they didn't get any financial aid. Well, as of this year, even though the question is still there, if you say no, do not register my student for the selective service, you'll still be eligible for financial aid. And that's why I said earlier in this conversation that two changes taking place this year will increase the number of applicants or number of families going after the financial aid, which will just create more competition for any senior family. So these are positive changes at the end of the day for a lot of families that were not getting the financial aid that they might have needed, but it's a challenge for everybody else because there's more people going after the same money. And so you just got to get things done correctly. Well, what's next? When are these other changes coming out? So next year in 2022, when you fill out the FAFSA, there will be some new changes. We just don't know what they are yet. The government has not announced them. So for all the junior families out there, just be mindful and keep paying attention to these things because these changes are going to be coming out, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, every year for the next 4 years. There will be changes happening in 2022, 23, and 24. So just stay tuned. We don't know what they are yet, but they will be there. So again, if you're a family of a high school senior, go to FAFSAkit.com. That's something that will help you make sure that you get the FAFSA done right now, quickly and correctly, in making sure that you get every single dollar of financial aid that you're eligible for and that you need to make college more affordable. And if your families of younger kids, maybe they're sophomores or juniors, keep learning or start learning. Don't wait until your kids are seniors, because while I'll be here to help you do all the right things, you can help yourself quite a bit by beginning to start learning the process, start learning the system, and see the things that you can do uh, to minimize the amount that the government is going to expect you to pay, and therefore increase the amount of money that the government's ultimately going to give you and colleges are going to give you. That's why it's so incredibly important to pick those colleges that will give you more financial aid and that will give you more free money instead of loans. So keep paying attention to the new FAFSA changes that are being rolled out. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. But the thing that I want to leave you with is this. Don't wait until your kids are seniors in high school to start thinking about financial aid. Start right now. Even if your kids are freshmen in high school or if they're in middle school, the more you can learn about this system, the more you can understand how the process works, the better empowered you will be, the more in control you will be to actually take all of these right steps and position your finances in the most financial aid friendly way in alignment with all of these changes that are going to be taking place in the coming years. The more time you can give yourself, the more opportunities, the more options you will have to save on the cost of college without having to borrow and go into debt or put that debt on your kids. So hopefully this is helpful. If you've got questions, let me know, and we'll be monitoring the comments and replying to your questions. And until the next time we talk, be well, all my best, and stay healthy out there. Take care.